So, taking that all into consideration, depending on the price of oil, which still fluctuates like crazy, and my cost of electricity, which doesn't fluctuate very much, I save between 32 cents and 47 cents per heating degree day using my geothermal system, as opposed to the oil system I was using at the efficiency it was at before, my oil system. This translates to a payback period of 11 to 17 years. If I subtract that $11,000, that goes down to 8 to 11 years. So the one question, because people are shocked by the amount we spent, and I understand it's a lot. But I always ask, when does your heating system pay for itself? How long does it take for yours to pay for itself? So when I'm asked that question now, so it's just something to consider. There are incentives, although it's just the loan program. Me personally, I would encourage someone to offer incentives on this, at least for homes that don't have access to natural gas. Because natural gas is a great, efficient way to heat your home, but oil is not the best. And this is a nice solution for someone in that situation. When I did this and tried to do this low-cost loan program, it was very difficult for me. I don't know if it's because I don't know how to maneuver with banks, but none of the banks were banks that I had done business with. When I called them, they said if I had an equity loan with another bank that they would not offer me a loan. So I had a hard time with this. Now this was several years ago. It could be very different now, but that's just my personal experience. The biggie here is this federal incentive through 2016. Now I do track my data in different ways, and here are some of them, but the more important one, blue and pink, that's heating degree day and kilowatts used for my geo system. And look at how well they track. It's just very interesting to me. So this is like one full winter. So something to consider. Thank you.
Question.
Yep.
Would it be possible to use the ground as a heat sink instead of a heat source?
Yes, and I do
I was
that.
wondering about that.
We now have air conditioning as well. It just runs in reverse, and so I put the heat in the summer and I take it out in the winter. It's very nice.
That's why you had to have the certain kind of duct.
Well, yes, the air ducts are
Insulated, right?
well,
For the air conditioning, they're insulated ducts, I think, right?
yeah, our ducts are not insulated.
Oh, okay.
But that is one thing I would recommend if you do have a basement, to insulate them.
Do you know if the geothermal would have been compatible with hot water heating system for your house? You said your domestic hot water is preheated, but would it be compatible with a hot water baseboard?
There is a system that they have out there. It was fairly new technology when I was looking, and it had issues. There's a geo forum or something where a lot of installers go on that I was tracking for quite a while, almost a year. So you can do water to water system instead of water to air, but it just wasn't as reliable at the time. And it's something that if I were building, it's something I would look at right now.
Can you stick around for a few
Yeah.
minutes? Okay, we gotta get Rob up here, so Ona will stick around until the end if you have more questions. Wait, on the wrong way.
Okay. I'm Rob Morrell in Lands and Forests. I built a new home in 07, 08, and we looked at all the different heat sources, and where we lived, we didn't have natural gas available. So I grew up handling wood, so I really was really interested in wood gasification. I really never gave the outdoor wood boilers a thought, just because of they're not very efficient. and they really spew quite a bit of smoke. When you're talking about gasification, it's best to consider a heat storage system. Really, that is the key to the success of burning wood. You're able to no longer treat it like a wood stove where the heat is there when you're making a fire. That allows me to store the heat. And in the summer, I can satisfy our domestic hot water needs by having, I'll get to that later, basically one burn, I call it like a 6-hour burn per week. I can capture enough BTUs to make all the hot water I need for that week. It's about 6 to 7 days depending on my daughters, and as they get older, it's but again, when you consider burning, doing gasification and using wood as a source, you have to be willing to handle wood. Or I have a coworker who buys wood by the cord of logs, and he handles it. He lives in a suburban area. He just buys logs, and then he cuts it and stacks it himself. I'm lucky to have a source. I have enough land, and I can gather the wood myself. But the wood pile is always there, and you have to work at it, and you get to it. That's about almost probably 18 months worth of wood. I'm actually behind, and I need to get a couple more stacked. But I only burn about 4 to 5 cords of wood a season, and it depends significantly on the type of wood you burn. I've become very aware of, I mean, we all know about, the value of, certain woods over others, but you become really intimately aware of it when you see the heat rise in the tank, depending on what you threw in it that day. And then when you're considering a wood gasification boiler, they're pretty heavy. And you have to consider how are you going to get it in the house, or are you going to have an outside facility to house it. I decided against an outside facility because, quite honestly, when I have my socks and I'm sitting, warm and toasty in the house on a January night, I don't want to go outside and feed the thing. I just want to go down. And mine's in my basement, hooked up to a basic masonry flue. It's kind of skewed, I apologize, but basically there's the setup. You have the boiler. You have it's hooked up in parallel with a propane backup. That has a sensor connected to the water tank. So if I don't do my job or I go on vacation and my water tank gets too low, it operates between about 120 and 175 degrees. If it drops down to 120, then the propane boiler will take over. And the propane boiler doesn't attempt to warm up the 800-gallon water tank that holds the BTUs. It heats the zone. You can see I have a lot of zones there. I have 6 zones. It heats the zone that's asking for the heat. It doesn't try to heat the hot water by itself. The TARM boiler requires an external air source. And per the manual, it just says it can't be hooked up directly to the TARM. It just has to be available. And so there's a 6-inch duct that just is right above where the fan blows.
What is TARM?
TARM USA is the company, and now they're called BioHeat. But if you type in TARM USA or TARM, you'll find them instantly.
Wait, the outdoor air source is connected to the TARM boiler or not?
That's as close as the outdoor source is, and all it is it's a flue that goes right to the outside. So you can say a lot of cold air might come in there in the winter. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's the outdoor air source right there. It's just basically a ductwork that goes, it's about a 20-foot run to, there's the other end of it, going out the wall. It really doesn't have an awful draw. But one thing is when I was making this house, I decided also to have a really superior insulation. So my house is insulated with closed cell foam. So it's tight as a drum. There's no drafts, and any circulation in the house is through an air exchanger that the house had to have because it's so tight. So it really doesn't really suck in a lot of cold air, except when the TARM is asking and pulling air.
Why is the outdoor air source not connected to the boiler?
Well, per the TARM manual, they did not. I don't know the mechanics of it, but they explicitly say don't try to, because, and you'll see in the next, I think it's the next slide. Well, there's the hot water tank. You can see basically when the heat, here's the copper pipes going in and coming out, and I have some better pictures of, it can be up to 50, 75, 100 feet away. In my case, I don't have to heat the copper pipes because it's so close and it's all in my basement anyway. If you could have this outside and run to your tank in the house, and in that case you probably would insulate the copper pipes that are bringing the hot water to the tank. And I have a good picture of the inside of the tank in a minute. There's the inside of the tank. I'm not going to read all this, but basically my tank is an 800 gallon, so it has 4 of these 12-inch diameter copper coils. And they basically, the hot water that gets heated by the boiler during the burn just gets circulated through all 4 coils and then back to get heated again. And that's how it heats the water inside the 800-gallon tank. The water inside the 800-gallon tank never leaves. It just simply sits there and gathers BTUs. It doesn't get shipped to the rest of the house. Anytime any of my zones in my house need that circuit to be heated, the valves open and close and their circuit gets circulated through here. So that is how the heat gets to the house. Some of my house has radiant heat. I have masonry floors in some areas, or stone floors. Some of my house has upstairs, just because of the way my house is built, I couldn't put radiant heat in the floors. So I have the newfangled wall panels, which mimic the old wave radiators, and they're really efficient. And then my third source of heat in my one big central area of my house, because I had wide pine floors, I could not put radiant heat under wide pine floors. It doesn't work. So I have hydronic hot air. And basically that's just copper coils get very hot from the hot water and blows air over those copper coils. And it delivers the hot air. The nice thing about that is it doesn't get very dry. It's always relatively comfortable moisture in the house. How is the heat delivered? Wall panels, hydronic hot air radiators. I spoke about that. And this is the TARM. This is a coil that would be used to deliver the heat if you did not use the 800-gallon or 400-gallon water tank. In my case, I put the heat into the water and I save it. This would be on demand, so it's a little different. So my TARM does not have this. That's just the fan. And this is the key to the boiler. It's a ceramic refractory that heats. It's down here and it superheats the air to about 1800 to 2000 degrees. And then the air is piped through these vertical chambers in the back of the TARM before it's exhausted outside. And back here, it's funny, this is where TARM has no diagram of how the heat gets to the hot water. And it must be there. I'm not going to take it apart to find out, but it must be their thing. And I could not find a diagram to share with you of how that water gets heated.
That's great.
Yeah, yeah. I scrape this out once a burn. They gave me a special tool, and you have to clean out around the floor of this, which is down here, and keep it free of ash. And that's basically once every 2 burns, I scrape it clean, and it's not a big burden. And I use the ash in my garden. Let's see, keep moving on. I'm not going to read this, but I'm sure Kevin can supply you this, and it's pretty interesting reading. It gets into the nooks and crannies a little bit more. They claim 75 to 80% efficiency. I'm not sure what that means because with wood, it really depends on the wood. It depends on the moisture content of the wood. There's a lot of variables. So air is forced through the firebox by that draft fan. Then the secondary air goes through the ceramic refractory where I showed you. And then it's combustion. The combustion both maximizes the efficiency of the wood and it eliminates almost all the gas and smoke. You look at my chimney when this thing is cooking and you don't see a thing. I try hard to use high quality wood and keep it as dry as possible. And so I don't have a problem with creosote at all. I mean, when I clean my chimney, there's nothing there. And it's been 3 years. So I'm pretty satisfied with it. And then the exchange tubes I showed you in the back is where the secret is, which I can't really share. And then I showed with you the copper coils that make their way over to the tank, and the copper coils inside the tank, and that's how the heat is shared with the water in the tank. The draft fan, now you're getting this fire cranking and it's getting really hot. The fan controls the air being pushed in there to create the heat. It has an auto shut off, and this is a really great thing. It protects you from overheating, but then it also maximizes the wood use, because when that core and the refractory get up to a certain temperature, the fan shuts off temporarily to save you from burning up all the wood unnecessarily. And until that refractory cools down as it's heating the whole system, the fan won't kick back on and start burning the wood again. So it's really efficient. I mean, sometimes it will be off for 45 minutes because it's gotten so hot inside if I've used hickory or like a red oak, and it's just cooking in there. And there isn't a problem with creosote because the fan's not blowing. There hasn't been any issues with that. It basically cleans itself out once it kicks on again. The water tank has a thermostat on it, and that's connected to my propane boiler. If the propane boiler sees the water tank is down below the operating temperature, I've actually lowered it to 115, then it will take over. When using radiant heat, you actually do have to be careful not to use too hot of water. So my circulators actually introduce cold water to cool the tank down, to cool the water down. So you don't cook your floors and have too hot of water going through your radiant system. Yeah, that's another consideration. It can be too hot for that. 800-gallon tank. It has 3 rubber membranes inside of it. It has 4 inches of insulation surrounding the whole tank. That thing, as I mentioned earlier, I can make one fire, and during the summertime, I think I get into this. I'll get into that. The water tank is collapsible. It wasn't a problem to get in there. They just set it up once it was inside. The water never leaves the tank. You do have to watch the pH to protect the integrity of the copper pipes inside. I had to add baking soda, and that brought it up, and I just monitored that. It's a little science project for my kids, and they test it. That's the operating temperature. And now TARM, I didn't say this, but TARM does not make the tank. Another company, STSS, makes the tank, and I'd be happy to share this all with you. And I had one little problem with the sensor, and they've been great. They said don't go over 175 degrees, and your rubber membranes will last forever. If you get too hot, you'll start to degrading them. I showed you that already. And I told you I had the zones. I think I shared that with you, how the zones send the water through the copper coils. I have the radiant circulator moves the hot water from the tank with the cold water for the radiant circuits. And I also, as I mentioned, domestic hot water for 7 days during the summer. This is just, I won't get into this, but they talk about the BTUs for the different types of wood, very interesting. And they in the manual, they talk about how you handle your wood. They were pretty, particular about that, and it makes a huge difference. Oh, and that's it. Yeah.
Have you ever considered using like those end blocks?
The what?
Those end blocks, the compressed sawdust blocks?
Well, they do have TARMs that will work on pellets. I haven't considered those. I haven't looked into those. I just have so much wood. It's not an issue for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about the difference between gasification and straight wood burning as far as burns the gases?
Right. That ceramic refractory is, I won't be able to get into the science of it. I haven't really trained myself to that level. I can just say that, you don't, because of the ceramic refractory, the exhaust that typically go up the chimney gets forced through there before it goes up the chimney, and so it gets burned a second time. And because of the heat and the pressure blowing in on it, it's just able to raise the temperature and burn that much more clean. That's the science I can get into.
It doesn't smolder when that fan kicks off? What's your emissions when the fan kicks off?
It doesn't, because it's, I also am particular about trying to keep the wood dry. So I put almost a quart of wood in my basement at a time. You can say it smolders, but I don't seem to have a problem with creosote. So it must maintain the heat. So even while the fan's not blowing, the air still has to go through there to get out. So maybe that's the trick to it. I apologize for not having a more scientific explanation. Yeah.
How do you start the furnace when you do your once-a-week burn?
It's just, I just have a stack of kindling and newspaper, and I get it going, and then it takes me probably about 5 minutes. Once I get sufficient enough coals, then I just, let it rip. I just then pile the logs in there. And the firebox is probably about this wide and about this high. And I just fill it once the coals are in there, and it goes. Once you kick that fan on.
So in my former life, I actually worked with TARM and Aquatherm and all the companies, and we were developing the STM test method for the efficiency, and there were specific issues because this is a complete burn. You're not dampering air down, you're just going all out pretty much with it. So it's actually a multi-stage combustion. So what you're doing is you're taking the wood, the solid fuel, you're gasifying it actually first, and then you're burning the off gas. You're not actually directly combusting the wood. So you're thermally degrading the wood. So then that ceramic refractory stays at that high temperature. So any smoldering, any products of incomplete combustion that would be in that initial chamber are going to go through that refractory and get fully combusted.
Yeah.
So that's why you're not seeing these incomplete combustion products. It's a multi-stage combustion.
Thank you. Yeah. That's about brings what I read, but I couldn't remember.
So this is a new house.
The new house.
So
I also have a 10K solar system too. I talked earlier too. So
PV system.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, you design your house from the ground up to incorporate this system. This wasn't any kind of a retrofit after the fact kind of thing. You thought this through right from the get-go.
That's true.
Okay.
Right. But I would say that if you have a hot air system, and you could use that ductwork, you'd have to put in a hydronic system to use the hot water heat. So, or if you have a radiators, you could also do it that way too. So the door to